Welcome to a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms new dawn today. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're on pan. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Hey, whoa. Where am I? How did I get in this
You're-
box?
Right? You're in Silver Linings. Let's get on into it, man.
Cool.
Hey man, just a second. Hey, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Take your time. Howdy,
No,
everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's been going on, man? How you been doing?
Doing better. I'm feeling better this week. I
Yeah,
was able to shake some of the funk that was on my voice, so it's good to be able to talk again. But yeah, so everything's every day is a good day above ground, I suppose.
right. That's good.
Yep. Also, been working on a really interesting article. Obviously, there's a news item this week or news item surfacing. It was really last week, but it's getting ugly in the crypto space with respect to the sentencing of Keon Rodriguez in the Samurai Wallet case, where the state accused him of building a piece of software that made it so that individuals could self-custody and never have that custody violated assets and move them around without interference or hacking or interdiction, right? An open source tool that let people protect their own privacy. And the DOJ pushes for a 5-year maximum sentence for the charge, which they pled guilty to on bad advice, probably. And the judge sentenced him to 5 years, the maximum, for building software that the DOJ just went out on stage and issued a major memo that said, we're not going to be pushing prosecutions like this, but they nonetheless did not withdraw their support for the maximum on this one.
Yeah, that's not surprising. I mean, the way they operate is that they'll try to take every inch and mile that they can get to try to build
No.
a case to
But there's a silver lining to it. There is a silver lining to it, and that's actually what the article reveals that I wrote. So, and I'll be publishing it on my Substack later in written form. I've already put out sort of a stealth look at it from the audio-visual form that I'm testing out. But but we have an example of that today that we can give people a preview of, and maybe we can talk about and highlight some points about the silver lining in this.
All right, that's fine. Let me pull it up real quick.
A good thing to
pulled
do.
it up just a second ago, and
Oh yeah, no rush. I'm just saying, like today we can do that.
yeah, okay. Well, like I said, let me pull it up real quick since you mentioned it. We'll get into it. Okay.
So, and this is apparently some kind of attention hack
of betrayal.
A video game speed run in the background.
Yeah, that's what's it called? Oh man, I hate it when that happens. F-Zero.
Yeah.
For the Super Nintendo.
It's going to go through some different games, but
yeah,
that's part of the fun. But wonder what happens to this game.
Well, let's get into it real quick.
Cool.
The trust of the future will not come from courts or cabinets or summits in Wyoming. It will come from structures that cannot lie. Written by Greg Lang and narrated by a generative AI voice inspired by a blend of Orson Welles' Tony Jay and Hugo Weaving's portrayal of V in V for Vendetta. Computer technology is on the verge of providing the ability for individuals and groups to communicate and interact with each other in a totally anonymous manner. Two persons may exchange messages, conduct business, and negotiate electronic contracts without ever knowing the true name or legal identity of the other. Interactions over networks will be untraceable via extensive rerouting of encrypted packets and tamper-proof boxes which implement cryptographic protocols with nearly perfect assurance against any tampering. Reputations will be of central importance, far more important in dealings than even the credit ratings of today.
Me yet.
These developments will alter completely the nature of government regulation, the ability to tax and control economic interactions, the ability to keep information secret, and will even alter the nature of trust and reputation. Timothy C. May, The Crypto-Anarchist Manifesto, 1988. 1. The invention of trust. You probably think you know what trust means. You trust your phone. You trust your bank. You trust your country, though perhaps not very much and only after coffee. But trust, as modern civilization built it, is not an emotion. It's an operating system. And like all operating systems, it's full of bugs disguised as features. The oldest bug is delegation. We delegate because we are finite, too small to verify everything, too mortal to watch everyone. So we built proxies. We called them banks, courts, regulators, agencies. We told ourselves they stood between us and chaos, when in fact they stood between us and verification. Every intermediary was a patch for ignorance. Every law was a hedge against betrayal. Every institution was a scaffold for trust, built taller with each collapse. And yet, somewhere between the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the collapse of truth itself, the scaffold became the edifice. We stopped patching ignorance and started worshipping it. We made trust the object of faith rather than the outcome of verification. We forgot that civilization's first contract wasn't social, it was mathematical.
New game.
That's what cryptography reminded us. Bitcoin didn't invent money. It reinvented certainty. It said, what if we built a system where verification is native and trust is an optional plug-in? What if we could transact, contract, coordinate, not
Go ahead,
because
we
we
can pause if you
believed in
if you
each
wanna-
other.
Yeah, I was saying it was an update to the social contract.
Yeah. Well, it's the first. When you think about the first contracts that we had ever, they were
Right.
with the notion of a shared reality.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
And how do you have a shared reality if you can't organize in groups that are small enough to know everybody?
we interpret in different ways. That
Yeah.
puts another spin on things. So there's always going to be conflict. It's
Right.
inevitable. That's why we need
Well, yeah, but
people to
it's
enter.
yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. Is like the way that it's organized embeds a kind of accreting decay that
Yeah.
makes it hard to keep systems that demand sort of longevity, like trust systems, from
Yeah.
decaying into corruption systems over time, just by the nature of the ways systems work, right? Institutions. It's the architecture of institutions, like in Law Zero, sort of touches on this, but this is a phenomenon that emerges from it, I think. You know?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Also, can you guess the game? Does anyone else love this game?
I don't know exactly what game it is. It
Okay, this
looks
one
maybe
is
Undertale, but I'd never played it.
Earthbound.
My little brother says, "Oh, Earthbound, okay."
Yep, this is a classic.
Okay. I'll get back into it real quick.
Cool.
But because the math left no room for betrayal. That was the beginning of the post-trust world. The elites called it chaos. The users called it freedom. The governments called it money laundering. And the coders called it Tuesday. Because for them, this wasn't politics. It was geometry. They weren't trying to overthrow institutions. They were replacing functions. In a world where verification is absolute, authority becomes decorative. And that, more than volatility, more than speculation, more than all the ransomware headlines combined, is what terrified the regime. Because power, in its final form, is not the ability to coerce. It's the ability to define what counts as real. Cryptography broke that monopoly. 2. The collapse of observation. Every state, every regulator, every bureaucracy depends on a single premise: that the observer defines the event. You can't tax what you can't see. You can't police what you can't name. You can't govern what you can't measure. That's why data became sacred. The census begat the database. The database begat the surveillance economy. And the surveillance economy begat the modern state's favorite delusion: that perfect visibility equals perfect control. It worked until the invention of systems that could hide perfectly in the open. Decentralized networks broke the equation between observation and control. They introduced a new kind of visibility: transparent, yet opaque. Everyone can see the ledger, but no one can see through it. It's a cathedral made of glass, where every pane is opaque from the outside. The watchers stared into it and saw noise. The builders stared into it and saw order. And that difference between noise and order was enough to fracture the metaphysics of governance. Because suddenly, the observer didn't define the event. The protocol did. And a protocol doesn't negotiate. To the regime, that was blasphemy. To the builders, it was salvation. When Tornado Cash appeared, it wasn't a conspiracy to launder money. It was a liturgy in a new church of mathematics. A declaration that privacy is not a crime, but a dimension of dignity. Roman Storm didn't sell invisibility. He sold symmetry, The right to use the same cryptographic shield that governments, corporations, and spies already use for themselves. That symmetry, not the tool, was what they punished. But the court didn't know what it was sentencing. You can't imprison a function. You can't exile an equation. You can only show the world that you fear them. The verdict wasn't a warning to the guilty. It was a confession from the powerful. We don't understand the system anymore. And in the weeks that followed, that confession metastasized into policy. 3. The Schrödinger Doctrine. In 2000, the Supreme Court performed the most delicate surgery in American legal history. It stopped the Florida recount and crowned George W. Bush. But it did something stranger in the fine print. It created a decision that was, by its own admission, both binding and not binding. Our consideration, they wrote, is limited to the present circumstances. Translation: this is precedent, but not precedent. Law and not law. Alive and dead until observed. Thus was born Schrödinger's precedent. A legal superposition that survives to this day. One set of rules for the powerful, another for everyone else, both existing simultaneously until the observer, the regime, decides which world you inhabit. Fast forward to August 2025. The Department of Justice, having convicted Roman Storm under the unlicensed money transmitter statute, suddenly materializes on stage at the American Innovation Project Summit and announces that writing code without ill intent is not a crime. A perfect mirror of the court's old incantation. Guilty, but not guilty. A precedent, but not a precedent. Because under this quantum jurisprudence, the waveform collapses only for the chosen. Roman Storm? Guilty. Developers of truly decentralized software? Innocent. Samurai Wallet's Keon Rodriguez? Guilty again, 5 years, maximum sentence. And yet in the same breath, DOJ insists it will no longer regulate by prosecution. The cat is both alive and dead. The law both applies and does not apply. And the people who write code, the ones who make the future possible, now live inside that box, waiting for the next observer to lift the lid. This is no longer rule of law. It is quantum theater. The regime performs collapse as ritual, choosing outcomes not by principle but by necessity.
Just real quick, I want to comment. This sounds a lot like segregated witness. Like as a concept, you know, you're on mute.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It does.
You know,
there's a parallel.
yeah. Okay, I'll go back into it. I just wanted to mention that.
Oh yeah, no, throw that in.
In Bush versus Gore, they called it democracy. In Tornado Cash, they called it justice.
Yeah.
In Samurai, they call it deterrence. But the pattern is the same. Each case a demonstration that power, when cornered by math, must revert to magic. Because only sorcery can explain a world where the same act, publishing code, makes one man a criminal and another an innovator, depending on who opens the box. 4. The heat death of governance. Every empire begins with clarity. It knows who it is, what it guards, what it fears. But clarity decays, meaning diffuses, and power, once pure in purpose, metastasizes into administration. The modern state does not rule, it measures. It has replaced intention with instrumentation. Every act of governance is now an act of observation. Every citizen, a telemetry point. Every transaction, a confession captured in triplicate. In theory, this should produce control. In practice, it produces blindness. The more a system observes, the less it understands. Every new camera multiplies perspective while diluting comprehension. The map grows until it eclipses the territory, and then, like an overexposed photograph, the details vanish into glare. Governance has become thermodynamic. The energy it spends on maintaining order generates more disorder than it contains. Each layer of oversight adds friction. Each mandate spawns another bureaucracy. Each enforcement requires another layer of oversight. Regulation accelerates until it becomes indistinguishable from noise. To watch everything is to drown in your own reflection. When a system cannot admit ignorance, it compensates with paranoia. It starts to see threats where there are only patterns. It builds models that predict rebellion in every variance, sedition in every silence. And since silence cannot be measured, it becomes the ultimate crime. Thus, visibility becomes the new virtue. To be seen is to be safe. To be hidden is to be guilty. The light itself becomes punitive. But light, when overconcentrated, burns. That's the paradox of total surveillance. It does not illuminate. It blinds. The more omniscient the observer, the more it hallucinates. Correlations become conspiracies. Statistics become suspicion. Governance becomes governance of ghosts. This is how the architecture of oversight turns on itself. It creates crimes to justify its own existence. It fabricates control loops so that it can continue to claim relevance. It prosecutes developers for code they cannot alter, just to remind the public that it still commands the realm of abstraction. The machinery of enforcement has become sentient in the dumbest possible way. Reflex without cognition, policy without philosophy. A bureaucratic organism whose only instinct is replication. It interprets inertia as success, entropy as evidence of vitality. To feed it, the state converts uncertainty into guilt. Anything indeterminate is dangerous. Anything unquantified is subversive. This is why privacy itself is now classified as suspicious behavior. Opacity is no longer the right to be left alone. It is the refusal to be observed, and therefore the refusal to exist. The prosecution of Roman Storm, the sentencing of Keon Rodriguez, these are not isolated actions. They are rituals of coherence. The regime, having lost control of meaning, reasserts itself through theater. It condemns code for being incorruptible, declares math to be malice, punishes privacy as heresy. Not because any of it restores order, but because it simulates the feeling of order. You can sense the exhaustion in the language. General deterrence, public interest, promoting compliance. These are thermodynamic phrases, formal acknowledgements that heat is rising, that meaning has thinned. Even the enforcers no longer believe. They're just tending to the machinery of decay. Entropy doesn't overthrow empires, it outlasts them. Governments die not from coups, but from information overload. The body politic collapses the way a star does, under the weight of its own gravity, until even light cannot escape. Surveillance becomes self-consuming, each data point another photon lost to the black hole of administration. And somewhere, deep in the event logs of the dying machine, you can still hear the faint hum of its first purpose: to know. That was its genesis, and it will be its end. For when everything has been measured, there is nothing left to govern. 5. The rebellion of geometry. When measurement collapses, faith in observation dies with it, and from that epistemic vacuum, something older than law begins to stir, something that remembers what it meant to make truth physical. The builders return. They are not revolutionaries in the political sense. They are heretics in the metaphysical one. Where the priests of governance seek visibility, the builders seek invariance. They do not trust words, nor decrees, nor courts, nor consensus. They trust only the permanence of structure. The old engineers of empire believed they could manage complexity. The new engineers of cryptography know that the only way to survive it is to encode constraint into the substrate itself. That's what the blockchain really is. Not a financial instrument, but a refusal. The world's first self-enforcing negation of human caprice. It is geometry turned moral, a law that cannot lie. For millennia, we tried to make laws that would bind the powerful, but the powerful always wrote the exceptions. So the builders abandoned syntax and turned to mathematics. They wrote rules that no one could amend, not kings, not courts, not mobs. They wrote finality into physics, and the old gods took notice. Because a system that cannot be overridden is, to power, indistinguishable from rebellion. It admits no sovereign, no regulator, no arbiter of last resort. It treats every participant as equal under the laws of thermodynamics. That was the true sin of Roman Storm and Keon Rodriguez. They didn't defy authority. They rendered it superfluous. They designed systems that functioned whether or not power approved. And for that, power had to make an example of them. But examples cut both ways. Each conviction proves that autonomy works. Each sentence confirms that censorship requires consent. Every time the state punishes code, it testifies to code's independence. Because to criminalize mathematics is to admit that mathematics is sovereign. Roman Storm wrote a privacy protocol. The regime saw sedition. Rodriguez wrote a non-custodial wallet. The court saw conspiracy. But the truth is simpler. They were both writing geometry. And geometry, once written, is forever. Theirs was not rebellion of protest, but of precision. Every hash a hammer blow against contingency. Every signature a sermon in irreversibility. They were not escaping the system. They were curing it of its delusion that control must be continuous. And the beauty of their rebellion is that it requires no followers. Once a structure exists that cannot be betrayed, belief becomes optional. Faith is replaced by verification, morality by mechanism, freedom by finality. That is the rebellion of geometry, a return to the oldest form of justice, where consequences are intrinsic, not imposed. It is the rediscovery of a principle so profound it terrifies those who live by loopholes. What cannot be altered cannot be corrupted. The builders are not at war with the state. They are simply building past it. Their tools are agnostic to politics, blind to jurisdiction, deaf to command. They are not trying to change the world. They are replacing the substrate on which world is defined. The sovereigns call it chaos. They call it equilibrium, because a system without privileged access cannot betray its participants, and a system that cannot betray is, by definition, incorruptible. That is the real revolution, not in the streets, but in the syntax of reality itself. When every ledger balances automatically, and every contract enforces itself, when every promise is embedded in the same immutable geometry, the distinction between law and physics disappears. And that is when civilization stops needing permission to be honest. 6. The event horizon. Every empire dies twice. First, when it loses the ability to enforce its will. Second, when it loses the ability to understand that it has already lost it. We are standing in the gap between those two deaths. The first death has already happened. The state has lost enforcement in the only sense that matters. It cannot impose reality anymore. It can impose pain, yes. It can cage bodies, yes. It can seize servers, stage press conferences, celebrate convictions. But it cannot make its version of how the world works stay true once it leaves the room. That power is gone. Once upon a time, when a judge declared a company illegal, the company ceased to exist. Now, when a court calls Tornado Cash a criminal enterprise, the code keeps running. When a prosecutor calls Samurai Wallet a laundering engine, the math that made it possible still holds. When the government points at a protocol and shouts, "Stop," it is not speaking to a person anymore. It is speaking to geometry. And geometry does not break under threat. It only breaks under contradiction. That is the first death. The loss of monopoly over the real. The second death is slower. It is happening now. It is the death of comprehension. Watch what's happening in plain view. 1. A developer, Roman Storm, writes privacy code. The Department of Justice says you operated an unlicensed money transmitter. Guilty. 2. The Department of Justice then goes on stage and says, writing code without criminal intent is not a crime. We will not criminally charge decentralized software purely for existing. Innocent. 3. Another developer, Keon Rodriguez, is sentenced to 5 years, the maximum, for helping build a non-custodial wallet designed to ensure that no one, including the developers, ever takes custody. Guilty again. The system cannot reconcile these states. It no longer even tries. It just holds them all at once and calls that policy. This is what the second death sounds like. The sovereign babbling in mutually exclusive legal universes and expecting reality to obey all of them. A healthy regime can tolerate dissent. An aging regime can tolerate defeat. A dying regime cannot tolerate incoherence. Incoherence is terminal. Because incoherence is not a messaging problem, it's a physics problem. If the same act is both protected innovation and felony conduct, then law is no longer functioning as law. It is functioning as a selector, a targeting mechanism, a way to mark specific humans for ruin. And when law collapses into targeting, something irreversible happens in the mind of the governed. People stop fearing prosecution as a moral outcome, I did wrong, therefore they came for me, and begin regarding it as a political outcome. They chose me, therefore I am guilty. At that moment, legitimacy is unrecoverable. You cannot get it back with speeches, reforms, summit remarks, balanced enforcement priorities, or memoranda about ending regulation by prosecution. Once people know the machine does not punish acts but actors, law stops being law and becomes a weapons system. Weapons systems can inspire fear. They do not inspire duty. That's the point of no return. That is the event horizon. And while outside, the state still looks intact, it still prints currency, runs elections, issues statements, files indictments, performs as though it governs. But inside, its authority has already red-shifted into ritual. You can see the redshift everywhere. A judge in Manhattan sentences a man who wrote wallet software to half a decade in prison and uses as moral justification that he failed to condemn the criminal world for whom digital currency is a gift.
I shit you not. The judge was like fiery about it.
He wasn't punished for laundering money.
Say it again.
The judge was fiery about it. Like literally, if you read the statement, this judge was like condemning this guy for not recognizing how crypto was evil and he should be prepared to mitigate that evil.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
problem, is that money's supposed to be neutral, right? But they hold
Exactly.
power, and they use their power to influence their own personal moral, objectives into the law.
The
And
trick
that's
is,
what creates
shouldn't
conflict.
our computer programs be as secure as we can make them?
Yeah,
So why should
And-
security researchers be subject to this double standard? They're trying to make our stuff as secure as they can make it, which is like, in its most ideal form, completely uncrackable by anybody, right? It would make hacking a useless activity if everything was unbreakable.
crypto is the potential to be like a hyperledger or a supervisory actor over all governments and keep them in line. And they see
Exactly.
that as a real threat.
Its
And
number
so
one
that's
use case is to put them on it so we can make sure they're being honest.
Yeah, they're supposed to keep us
know?
in line, but nobody keeps them in line. This is a nightmare. Not
Right. I mean,
Washington
and
State,
for
right?
instance, making strong privacy that not even they can violate means that privacy rights are protected.
Yeah,
Right. If they can find a way to convict somebody despite the fact that they have strong privacy rights, then they're doing their job. But if they have to break privacy rights in order to convict anybody, that means they're incompetent and they're using the breach of rights as a cover for their inability to do their job. And it's time that we started treating it like it was. That this is just programmers making the world work as well as they can. In the vein of research they study, these are the people that develop the privacy tools that we currently use, that are just doing the next best thing, right? How is it that all of a sudden they've gone too far, and how are they supposed to know that in advance?
Yeah. I mean, this is always the case, is that people see a use case for some sort of software, and then they think they can put it into practice, and then the state comes in and interferes because they're acting on the behalf of other people.
Right.
Because
But
neutrality comes at a premium. You can see stuff like this with there was a Switch emulator last year or whatever that was put up on open source, and Nintendo basically stepped in and had the law. They filed lawsuits.
They've always been weirdly against emulation when all that does is keep their IP alive.
Yeah, right. And that's just, I mean, this is just a very minuscule. I mean, they're not a small actor in any particular way, but this is just an example of how you can twist the law to your advantage because you're imposing your ethical point of view of how other people act.
Right. Well, we're on this whole point of what old IP could be done, or what could be done with old IP. I just have to pause here and say, hey, Square Enix, Chrono Trigger, you're wasting that franchise, and I'm getting older every day, and I haven't seen anything since Chrono Cross that wasn't just a rehash. What the hell?
Let's open source it, baby.
That franchise needs to be freed.
Yeah, copy left.
But anyway,
no, you're fine. No, I was just saying. But
no, it's a conundrum, but the silver lining is onward. So let's keep going.
The important thing is that the conversation is being had and more people are hearing it. And the potential for a real life hyperledger over state actors is becoming more and more possible every day, and that's what they're talking about in this video, basically. So,
right.
I get back into it there. Sorry about that.
Cool. No, it's cool.
He was punished for failing to perform loyalty to the narrative. That is liturgy, not law. A prosecutor stands on stage in Jackson, Wyoming, and assures the industry that writing code without ill intent is not a crime, then returns to an office still actively seeking maximum sentencing for someone whose crime was to mechanize financial privacy at scale. That is theater, not governance. The sovereign power of the 20th century said, "We forbid this because it is dangerous." The sovereign power of the early 21st century says, "We forbid this because it implies that we might not be necessary." The difference matters. One is paternalism, the other is existential panic. And panic has a physics. Panic causes acceleration. Acceleration produces heat. Heat produces failure. The more aggressively a failing regime tries to assert dominion over mathematics, over topology, over cryptography, over irreversibility, the faster it burns through the last of its perceived legitimacy. The faster it burns legitimacy, the more force it must apply to retain compliance. The more force it applies, the more obvious it becomes that compliance is no longer voluntary. The more obvious that becomes, the more people quietly rout around it. This is not a political cycle. It is an energy cascade. The energy of belief is depleting. The energy of enforcement is spiking. The structure cannot maintain both states. When that imbalance peaks, the surface will crack. And what rises through that fracture will not look like a revolution to anyone trained on the aesthetics of 1776 or 1789 or 1917. There won't be barricades. There won't be mobs looting palaces. There won't even be manifestos. You will simply wake up one morning and discover that the systems people rely on to live, coordinate, transact, and defend themselves no longer meaningfully involve states. Commerce will still happen. Contracting will still happen. Identity will still happen. Protection will still happen. But it will all rest on cryptographic assurance instead of institutional authority. Disputes will be settled by mechanism, not mediation. Reputation will be portable and verified, not bestowed. Association will be voluntary and encrypted, not licensed and recorded. You won't apply for access to an economic network any more than you apply to participate in gravity. That moment is not utopia. It is not even necessarily kind. It is simply post-permission. And that's the final terror for the legacy regime. Not that it will be overthrown. Overthrow would flatter it. Overthrow implies it was still the true center of the world. The true terror is that it will be bypassed, that life will continue without it, that the main loop of civilization will execute elsewhere, that law will survive, trust will survive, exchange will survive, and sovereignty, as historically understood, will not.
Real quick, I just wanted to mention, thinking about what they're saying here, think about the USSR, right? Once it just totally capitulated and reverted and basically let go of the grip of power, there was no, everyone just kind of lost their shit because there was no direction or guidance in how their economy
It was
worked.
like everybody was on a string in a centrifuge and the strings were clipped all of a sudden. They all flew off in whatever direction they were headed at the time.
And that's, I mean, basically, if crypto wasn't in place, that's what's going to happen to the United States, is because it's been a middle manager for so long.
Yeah.
And, you know,
well, it's not unique here. This is not a unique case.
No,
right?
it's not. Yeah. But I'm just saying, this gives people more leverage, more momentum when that does happen. It will happen, but it's not.
Well, the cool thing about this imperial collapse is the scaffolding for it to continue to function without any empire at all will be right there in place when it does.
Yeah.
And people just won't notice. You know, the sun will shine on the street and the birds will chirp and people will still fix potholes, you know?
Right. Let's just have a little bit more options at that point.
Yeah.
Let's get back into it.
Black hole physicists call this point an event horizon, and this metaphorical one is no different. The point of no return. You cannot pull a thing, or anything holding information about it, back across that line once the line is crossed. Beyond it, no events may ever be observed. You cannot talk a civilization back into believing in permission once it has seen a system that runs on irreversibility instead. The final act, then, is not collapse, it's migration. And so the center of coherence moves. It leaves the cathedral of compliance and takes up residence in the mesh, in code that nobody owns, in ledgers that nobody edits, in systems that assume betrayal and render it harmless. That's how the story ends for architectures of control. They don't get tugged down like statues in front of besieged palaces. They get made irrelevant. And the only people who still fear them are the people still pretending to run them. Epilogue. The coherence of collapse. Read carefully. The Department of Justice now says that merely writing code without ill intent is not a crime. That the department will not use indictments as a lawmaking tool. That where the evidence shows that software is truly decentralized and solely automates peer-to-peer transactions, and where a third party does not have custody and control, new charges will not be approved. These are not clarifications, they are admissions. Because just weeks earlier, the same department secured a conviction against Roman Storm on precisely that ground, for building software that did solely automate peer-to-peer transactions, that did not give any third-party custody or control. And 1 week before Galeotti's speech, Kion Rodriguez received the maximum sentence for doing the same thing. You can almost hear the machinery backfiring mid-sentence. The same government now declares unlawful the logic it has just acted upon, retroactively disowning its own posture as if a new memo could realign physics. It cannot. Power that contradicts itself in public is already losing coherence. When a regime both convicts and repudiates its own conviction, it is no longer executing law. It is hallucinating it. It speaks in quantum states, guilty and not guilty, code and crime, door and keyhole, simultaneously true until the verdict collapses. In this hall of mirrors, every developer is Schrödinger's defendant. The regime observes when it needs a body, unobserves when it needs applause. And it no longer even bothers to hide the dissonance. It sells it as virtue. Even-handed enforcement, they call it. Two hands. One writing policy, the other tightening the cuffs. The incoherence would be comic if not for the years it steals from human lives. It would be a bureaucratic embarrassment if it did not end in prison walls and ruined careers. It is a system so dependent on contradiction that to act consistently would mean admitting defeat. And yet the deeper problem is not hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is human. The problem is metaphysical. Because what these gestures reveal is not corruption of law, but the end of law as a coherent language. When enforcement becomes indistinguishable from improvisation, when punishment precedes rulemaking, when a public confession of uncertainty is treated as exoneration rather than indictment, the state has entered semantic decay. That's what we are witnessing. The autophagy of authority. The regime eating its own logic faster than it can print new justifications. The rhetoric of innovation masking the theology of control. Trump's declaration that the war on crypto is over sits atop this carcass like a flag planted on a collapsing glacier. Yes, the war is over. In the same way the body stops fighting when the disease consumes everything worth defending. You can end a war by winning, or you can end it by surrendering to entropy. And this is the latter. The DOJ can't make peace with innovation because innovation is no longer a front it can patrol. The terrain has shifted beneath it. Code has moved beyond reach, beyond permission, beyond the architecture of fear that sustained 20th century power. And so the regime must play both sides of its own narrative, punishing as it apologizes, condemning as it forgives, promising as it prosecutes. It is the death rattle of gatekeeping disguised as grace. And it tells us everything we need to know about what comes next. Because when power must deny its own actions to appear legitimate, it is already post-sovereign. When it must issue statements assuring developers that it will no longer invent crimes, it has already confessed that it did. And when the same mouth that speaks those words still sends engineers to prison, it is not speaking law. It is venting static. The incoherence is not accidental. It is the last survival strategy of systems that can no longer coerce belief. They cannot restore trust, so they simulate it through contradiction, hoping the noise will drown out the silence of their own irrelevance. But silence does not forget. Silence records. And somewhere in that silence, every block still confirms, every transaction still settles, every piece of code still runs. Geometry keeps its own minutes. The state will call this instability. History will call it transition. Coda, the shape of trust. You probably think you know what trust means. You trust your phone. You trust your bank. You trust your ISP. But that other kind of trust, the kind you can withdraw or perform, the kind that depends on spectacle and ceremony, that kind is dying. It dies every time a government promises clarity and delivers contradiction. It dies every time the code keeps running after the gavel falls. It dies because it was never really trust. It was permission dressed as faith. Real trust is not granted. It is engineered. It is the property of systems that do not require you to believe. It is the logic of geometry, consistent, incorruptible, blind. This, then, is the final irony. As the state loses coherence, trust itself is migrating, out of institutions, out of policy, into architecture, into ledgers that balance themselves, into contracts that execute without clerics, into systems that remember what power forgets. The trust of the future will not come from courts or cabinets or summits in Wyoming. It will come from structures that cannot lie. And when that trust arrives, when it becomes normal to believe in code instead of decree, the old faiths will crumble without a fight. They will fade the way gods do when their miracles stop working. Because once you've seen that truth can be proven instead of asserted, you don't go back to believing anyone at all. The architecture of betrayal has reached the end of its story. The architecture of trust has only begun to write its own. We must defend our own privacy if we expect to have any. We must come together and create systems which allow anonymous transactions to take place. People have been defending their own privacy for centuries with whispers, darkness, envelopes, closed.
Say it again.
This last bit's a quote again.
Oh, okay.
Doors, secret handshakes, and couriers. The technologies of the past did not allow for strong privacy, but electronic technologies do. Eric Hughes, A Cypherpunk's Manifesto, 1993.
The end.
That's good, man.
Not too shabby.
No.
You guys got to hear it first.
Right? Man, I mean, there's a divergence here between what's called positive law, and I mean, anybody who's listening to this probably knows about that, and negative law or natural law. And it really shows that there's a shelf life, power. It never is sustainable in the long term because people have things they want to say. They want to say it privately. They want to say it publicly, and this is what happens: is that
Yeah.
eventually they run out of gas, and enough people see through the bull crap, and they know that the
Well,
game's
and
up.
even if a system like once created huge prosperity, um, ultimately huge prosperity creates people who aspire to self-govern.
Yeah.
Right. And this aspiration to self-govern, like the democratic urge, ultimately causes the systems that create all like these institutions that they build before people get that will to conflict. Right. So society ends up being at war with itself because prosperity breeds independence.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it this way too. People are going to jump ship because they see the opportunity to make more money than what they're already doing. So they're not going to sit there and just take a loss because the
Mhm.
people that they know and that are in power aren't able to keep up with the fresh bucks or whatever you want to call it, the young
Yeah.
guns.
Well, the silver lining here, though, is that we really kind of already won it in a way, right? All of those of us who have been trying to get this system to not be such a existential crisis in the making, right? So just a train wreck in obvious slow motion, have been working on building stuff that will make it so that when it finally does fly off the edge of the track into the ravine, that there's something else that's better, and that people will just be watching that happen when it does. But it will be more of a curiosity than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that we support those people because what is the alternative? The alternative is we go into bankruptcy and everybody loses their shit. And we go on to another world war, and we don't know what happens with that.
Imagine if we'd
other
had a
than
decentralized food aid system in place that was better than SNAP when the government shut down, right? Would
Right.
anybody sign back up for the government one after they tried the better one that they had already decentrally built somewhere else? No, right?
No,
These are the
I
kinds
mean,
of systems we have to build if we want to not be dependent on this thing anymore, right?
I mean, if we can 3D print pizza, why can't we do that with other foods?
Right. And why can't we make it so that decentralized networks provide for the needy and or at least vector resources towards them, so that local organizations can handle it. Like that could happen. That could happen so easily now. Right?
Right.
There's
I
just
mean,
as easy a case for central bank digital currency as there is for central food bank digital coordination, where the system, I guess decentral rather, the system itself is just sort of a marketplace for information about where they need to send aid.
and this is another point of divergence is that back in the 60s and 70s or whatever, they said food prices are getting too low. We need to artificially so people can make money off of food.
Right, which is insane.
Yeah, and
That's the
the
insanity of
divergent
supply
state.
side economics.
Yeah, our actions are well intentioned, but at the same time, they don't coordinate with reality. And this is what happens: is that reality butts its head and says, "Not so fast," and you find yourself in a situation where your well-intentioned ideas are falling flat on their face.
Right. Well, I mean, and it also that echoes back to why Kynes was so popular with governments, right? Because before the idea of economic incentive as a mechanism to bootstrap an economy, like it's a internal combustion engine or something that you can just squirt some nitrous in there and it'll rev back up when it's starting to wind down. That worldview says that supply instigates demand. That worldview could not be anything else, right? Because that's the setup for the idea that we can put money into people's hands as a way to make the economy work better.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't follow that idea and you instead follow the idea that it's demand that drives supply, then it doesn't make any sense at all to do that.
Right.
So
no matter what we
obviously,
do, objectively, there's always going to be a shelf life in our actions. And I think it's healthy for society. I mean, it's kind of a revolving door, yeah, but it keeps us fresh, keeps us on our toes.
Yeah.
You know, it can be
Well, I mean,
dangerous, like we
and
can said before, but it could all be incredibly healthy.
right. And you can't legislate against reality either. And that's another big
No,
part of this, right? You can't make a world uh, be a different way just by writing a law. And yeah, and that's a big part of this, right? Like computer security has been improving very slowly but surely. But the advances we've made in it have allowed us to do cryptocurrencies, for example, which like
yeah,
for people who don't understand how cryptography works into this, none of it would be possible if there weren't advances in public key cryptography that happened in the 90s. Like none of it. It
yeah,
just couldn't have worked. It all started off with something simple like PGP, where you manually use the encryption software to encrypt one chunk of information. And they took that tech and they automated it. So this whole big system encrypts little packets here and there all the time to make itself work securely.
right,
And it's those advancements that people don't see as sort of like what guys like Roman Storm were experimenting with, right? Like that he was looking at it going, okay, so I have this idea that we can cryptographically secure knowledge or is it proof of somebody's stake in a thing without knowledge of who they are, right? So that we can
yeah,
issue receipts that are essentially bearer bonds for a claim. And you can get them just by submitting the thing that you're submitting, but without identifying yourself at all. Right? That's how you can get out the other side of a Tornado Cash contract without connecting one side of the identity to the other. And it relies on a zero knowledge proof that is an advanced piece of security research, right? Not just anybody, but these guys could have figured out how to do it. And you know, it's insane because these were the brightest forefront people in the field in the United States, and now instead of working on the things they would be working on now, we're losing to the rest of the world while we try to jail our brightest innovators in this field. It's freaking insane.
I mean, that's what Mark Zuckerberg was saying in Congress, is that you can't expect to, be the leaders of innovation if you refuse to actually do anything. I mean, not to put over Mark Zuckerberg or anything, but I'm just saying, that.
Right. Like, imagine if they
Hubris is
jailed Alan
dangerous.
Turing instead of giving him a job at Bletchley Park. The modern computing environment wouldn't exist.
I saw a video on No More Capitalist maybe about 6 months ago. He was talking about somebody who was a coder, and they wanted to do something. This is back in the 90s or maybe late 80s, and in order for him to practice in the field, he had to renounce his citizenship because they said what he was doing was against the law. I
Right.
mean, code is code, speech is speech. I thought this is, the United States. Apparently not, but
Well, I can prove that code is speech right here.
yeah.
Check this out. Watch this. I'll do it right now, and you don't have to do anything. I'm just going to edit my headline real fast. So,
Yep.
Anybody who knows any kind of programming knows that I just used the absolute equality or the strict equality symbol, right? 3 equal signs in a row. At least in JavaScript, I think, and some others, right? This is not an uncommon trope. It means that the thing is an exact match to the other in thing or in content and type. So it actually addresses type as well as content.
That's cool.
And I've taken a pseudocode-ism, right? And I've expressed something that you can express in code that you can't express just by saying the words, right? That it compresses the language down, right? It's just like math. Like you write an equation so you don't have to say all the stuff, but you can
Right.
always unpack a math equation into a paragraph if you want to.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. So how is this not speech, right? especially when you're holding this up in the political sense to say it deserves First Amendment protection, right?
Well, I mean,
The phrase that I just put here makes this First Amendment protected speech of the highest order.
yeah. I mean, there's whole
And it's
there's
written
whole,
with the help of code. So how is
Right.
it not speech? I feel like the whole thing proves itself. It's a dumb argument to make that code isn't speech.
Yeah.
Pe-
Yeah, there's-
People don't write computer code just to talk to computers, to give them instructions. They do it to tell other programmers how they're doing things.
comment here. William
It's like,
says,
it would be like outlawing the language. It would be like outlawing the output of particle accelerators.
yeah.
It's nonsense to say that code isn't speech.
Well, you got these people who are pretty skeptical types, so it's you'll be beating your head over a desk for days trying to convince them, and they'll never, because they're just
Well, I mean,
born to be skeptical.
some people will look reality square in the face and refuse it, but I'm not trying
Yeah.
to convince them. Nobody should waste
No,
their time
I
trying
know.
to convince people like that.
I understand. I'm just saying that it's something to consider. Silver over $50 is a silver line. Absolutely. I don't know what the
Yeah.
spot price is at the moment, but it's over 50, man. It's going to go higher than that. That's not investment advice. That's just my, armchair logic about the subject.
Yeah. Well, my whole thinking on this, though, is the silver lining here is that we kind of have already won, right, in a way. Because the fact that the state is doing this, though it sucks for the people that are being targeted, and we should really support them because, injustice is obviously taking place when a guy who writes freaking software that protects people's privacy is being punished for being a money transmitter. Like, what? Like 5 years in prison for writing code that later gets interpreted to mean you were a money transmitter?
Yeah.
What the hell? Like, this is the United States. We don't do injustice like that. We shouldn't. It should be
the law has always been leveraged by lawyers to maintain status, prestige.
Well, I mean, and lawyers that are facilitating that have no excuse. I was trained the same way they were. One of the first things they taught us in law school was that we were supposed to defend the right of things, that we were supposed to look at them agnostic to our self-interest while being aware of what our self-interest is.
Yeah.
And lawyers who aren't doing that are failing. They're practicing unethical law.
Well, that's why they're politicians.
Well, exactly, because you don't need a license for that. I'm sure they'd like to make a license for that if they could get away with it. But
I mean, you got people like John Fetterman in power. I mean, if people like that could be, up in Washington making laws and assisting in the development of law, there's really no actual law and order in place.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I mean, think about it. It's a lot like the way the mass media has failed, right? Like, I think I saw Dave Smith the other day online say something funny. It was something like because he was not invited on some stupid cable news show.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I'm so crushed that I'll not get access to the 12% of 93-year-olds that still watch this." Like, the world has moved on from watching cable.
Yeah.
And the only people that still take it seriously are the people who work in it, right? And there's enough of them that it can sort of look like there's still some vitality in it, but it's mostly just a dying industry talking to itself in the dark.
What do you mean I can't watch Bill O'Reilly on Fox News anymore? He was the best.
Right?
He's been out for a while.
I feel like the thing itself may actually be representing it's coming apart, as opposed to lashing out as wounded. I think what we might be seeing is the death spiral.
Yeah. William says, truth, writing code is not a crime. Absolutely.
All right. One of the funniest things they ever did in the 90s crypto wars was print a program in a book.
Right.
And ship it to a friend overseas. And the case would have required them to bring munitions. This is international exchange of arms level munitions problem, whereas an American wrote a book containing language and send it
mean-
overseas. And like it just the First Amendment implications were so ridiculously obvious because of the format they chose. That it's like it's just as good as printing a band algorithm or a cryptographic algorithm that's advanced on a T-shirt.
Right? Write a program, solder it to a NES cartridge, ship it off somewhere else, have them dump the content from the
Go in an
memory chip,
online
and then-
game and express it. Write a QR code and express it in QR codes using the online game. You can build an entire Roblox world around conveying your program in a series of QR codes. There's an example of how you can do it.
I think it was a JavaScript exploit that happened a little while ago, maybe about a year ago, and it happened on the weekend. And they used Roblox or maybe it was Minecraft to execute it.
Yeah, it's funny because in espionage circles, it's like the Matrix. They'll jump into the online game, run to their contacts, do their information drop, and then get out. It's pretty amusing how MMORPGs ended up being, like that scene from the Matrix where they go in and they have to deliver the package and get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. It's weird how reality is turning into the same sort of thing. Anywho,
well,
but
are we gonna cut it off here for right now?
Yeah, I think we should wrap here, and because I've got to go get my good friends and partners ready for their big trip down to Argentina, which I will be chronicling online and probably talking about some here. We might even be able to get one of them to pop in and say hi from Argentina because it's the same time zone as we're in, I think, roughly.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Check us out tomorrow on World Blockchain Roundtable.
It's like plus or minus 3, I forgot. But same daylight hours.
Yeah. 10 Central, 11 Eastern, and check us out on Friday. We'll be going over Law Zero some more. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see y'all later. Bye. Just a second. I'm sorry. I got to try to.
No worries.
Let me leave and come back.
Hey. Mondrian, in case anyone was wondering.
Well, I don't know if I can.
Bitcoin, baby.
Hey, yeah, this is Bitcoin. I'm back. The king of the rap shit. I'm back in this Bitcoin, baby. I'm back in this bitch. Flossing fast cars and rolling with my clique. The king of the rap shit, the real OG. Whack ass rappers got nothing on me. Bought another Lambo, 3 hoes inside it. 10 hoes in line, ready to ride it. It's Bitcoin, bitch. Keep the track bumping. Really on the plug. I got pies in the oven. 80 years old, and your baby mama fond of me. All she wanna do is smoke my broccoli. Private jets from Rome to Ibiza. Lisa, Jenny, Julie, and Maria. Every day I gotta give thanks. I got bitcoins in the bank. Bitcoin, baby. I'm back in this bitch.
Bitcoin, baby. Oh,
I'm a bad motherfucker.
Bitcoin, baby.
The king of the rap shit. I'm back in this bitch. Axe your grandmother. Verse 2, coming with the gin and the juice. Call me a dragon. Spit flame in the boot. I'm hot, like a thermos full of coffee. So hot, can't get the hose off me. It's true. I got the weed card and shit. I'm smoking like a motherfucking chimney, kid. Bitches love me. My shit's never whack. Tell these motherfuckers Bitcoin's back.
Bitcoin, baby.
I'm a bad motherfucker.
Hot like hot coffee. Oh,
Axe your grandmother.
Surprise, motherfucker.
The king of the rap shit. I'm back in this bitch.
Get your hands in the air. Put your hands on the car. Put your 2 hands on the rock. Put your 2 hands on the road.
Bitcoin, baby.